So I'm sure that Impressionism is the favorite of many people. And many people recognize Impressionism as long as they are looking at a painting by Degas, Monet, Pissarro. We all know the names, and sometimes we cannot distinguish between each one of them. So we're going to study about the general characteristics of Impressionism and a little bit of the history of Impressionism itself and the artists. So first, I'm going to tell a joke. I'm very bad telling jokes, but I'll try. And I'm going to tell this. A thief in Paris planned to steal some paintings from the Louvre. After careful planning, he got past security, stole the paintings and made it safely to his van. However, he was captured only 2 blocks away when his van ran out of gas. When asked how he could mastermind such a crime and then make such an obvious error, he replied, "Monsieur, that is the reason I stole the paintings. I had no money to buy Degas, to make the Van Gogh. See, you have the goal to show this to someone else. I am showing it to you because I think I had nothing to lose." So I thought I would begin this class with this joke, and I hope you had enjoyed it. I cannot hear you laugh, but I'm sure that you laughed in your houses. So who are the precursors of Impressionism? What happened before this movement started? And we have, first of all, painters like Delacroix. He's one of the predecessors. He chose to use color instead of the outline, instead of contour, instead of what it's called disegno in Italian. So he painted in his studios. He did not go out to paint like we're gonna see with Impressionists. But one of the characteristics that the Impressionists are gonna like is that idea of color before design or before the outline of a figure and the composition. He did something also called this technique that was used also by Leonardo da Vinci, that is called Sumato. What we see here in this example, this is an unfinished painting by him of Georges Sand, and we see here that there's no boundaries, there's no limit between the hair or the head and the background. So he mixes the colors, and this is an idea, an effect that gives us this kind of blurry image that the Impressionists are going to use in their own paintings and their own compositions. So this is one example of how Delacroix is one of the predecessors, and he's going to influence the young generation. This diffuse color, the not defined outline, is one of the characteristics that we're going to see with the Impressionists. Now, the other movement that was very fashionable, and also Delacroix is going to be one of the leaders of that movement, is Orientalism. Actually, he traveled to different places in the Middle East, and here we have an example of that faraway place. And so the topic is something that is going to change also with Impressionists, but not quite with everyone. For example, here we have a painting by Renoir honoring Delacroix. These are the Parisian women in Algerian costume. The other ones are represented here of a harem painted by Delacroix. So the idea of bringing to Paris, bringing to France, a place that is far away, this exotic place that they're going to idealize, we have a continuation of this kind of subject matter. So not everything is a reaction. Renoir, who's going to paint many portraits. Here we have him painting Madame Clementine Valency's Dora. It's also called L'Algérienne because she was from Algiers, she was Jewish, and she was the wife of an antiques dealer, Nathan Stora. And what we see here is that Renoir is going to choose painting her with her classical or traditional costume from Algiers. But what she wanted to do was to belong to society, to belong to the Parisian society. So she did not like this painting at all. And we see him being influenced by Orientalism, which was in vogue. This was a kind of painting that people wanted. So they commissioned a lot of paintings from this idealization of a faraway place. So we have that painters like Delacroix are going to be also involved with another artistic movement that is called Symbolism, when there is a message. And it's also very, very close to literature. They're going to be inspired by poetry, by stories that have been written. So, for example, here, Eugène Delacroix is going to portray Mephistopheles in the sky because he has seen a theatrical production in London of Goethe's Faust. So he's going to illustrate this story. As we're going to see later on, Manet is going to do with Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. This is the literature that is going to be influencing art during this period. And for example, here we see this by Manet that painted a specific phrase from The Raven, that shadow that lies floating on the floor. So it's an illustration. And symbolism comes also from Spanish paintings, like, for example, Goya. Goya had painted these engravings, many engravings, by the way, called Los Caprichos, not as a commission, but also he painted because he wanted to. And here we have, there's also political involvement by Goya. This is going to change also with the Impressionists. And another precursor, another forerunner is Dominique Ingres. So the combination of Orientalism with this painting, with also the technique that is very academic, as you can see here, very meticulous. Dominique Ingres paints the Grand Odalisque, the idea of this ideal beauty. Look how long is her torso, because it's not exactly very anatomical. So it's very romanticized at the same time. We see also the technique of how to paint fabrics or the feathers of the fan or each one of the elements that she's wearing, like this turban or this piece of jewelry. We have another thing going on at that time. It is trade with the Far East, with the Orient. Samuel Siegfried Bing, he was a German art dealer living in Paris, and he's going to open up a store for import and export. And he brings Japanese and other Asian goods to France, and he exports French objects to Japan. Here we have him in this photograph sitting down with some friends, and they are all wearing kimonos. So this is also something that we're gonna see in the paintings by the Impressionists. Siegfried Bing is right here, and he also had a magazine, and many artists are going to read that magazine that was focused on Japanese art, Asian in general, also the collections of ukiyo-e, or Japanese prints, woodcuts specifically, that are going to be an influence. Because look at the flat areas right here. There's no contrast between very diffuse or very blurry background with the foreground. And here we have a painting of Madame Monet, like you see right here, she's wearing a kimono. In the background, we see many fans that are brought from Japan mainly. And he also collected those ukiyo-e, as you're going to see with other artists. Now in this painting, which is an unfinished painting by Dominique Ingres, we can see the underpaint, because he didn't finish this painting, because during this period, what we see is that artists are going to try to vanish, or at least avoid showing you the brushstroke. But in this case, because this is the underpaint, we see the brushstroke, we see the preparatory lines that we find here. And that is what they're going to use. So we have here Madame Pissarro, painted by, of course, Camille Pissarro. And you see the sketchy feeling, like it's not finished, because you see each one of those brushstrokes. That is one characteristic that is very important. For example, here we have a detail of Ingres painting, and that underpaint that we see here with those brush strokes that are very fast. And then he's going would cover them, but he didn't in this case. And artists like Manet are going to use that. And Manet is going to have the portrait of Berthe Morisot, which you see right here, with lots of black, because she's wearing black. Look at her hat, her color, also her coat, etc., in contrast with the light coming from that window behind her. And Berthe Morisot also was a painter. She's going to become an artist, and here she's going to be painted by Manet. Another thing that is happening at the time is that there's social awareness, the differences of classes. And Honoré Daumier, who was a caricaturist, he is going to capture one of those expressions and the physiognomy, how each person looks. They are just staring at the theater stage, which we don't see. They are in that booth, and each one of them looks different. So that social awareness is also going to influence some of those artists. Pissarro was part and was a member of an anarchist group. So again, we usually try to avoid that. We only see the art itself, but there's also their lives and what happened during their lifetime. As you can see this painting by Daumier, because he was concentrated in those socialist ideas. Like we see here, poor people traveling in the third-class carriage, and he is capturing their images, their expression, their sadness, and poor people that abound in Paris at the time. The Barbizon School is also one of the forerunners of the Impressionists. In this case, we see Jean-François Millet. He's painting the gleaners. These are the poor people. These are the last people who go to the field, and they're gonna get what is left from the crops. So they are cleaning the field as they go along. We don't see their faces. We don't see who they are, the anonymity of the workers, of the poor people, but also they are painting it in a much more realistic way and capturing light. They go to the countryside, they paint light. At the same time, we have Realism by Gustav Gober. He's going to have his own salon. He's going to name it the Salon de Realism. And when the World Exhibition happened in 1889, he's going to have his own pavilion. He's going to show his work, very realistic. And here we have the artist studio. He is in the center. We see him painting this huge canvas. The model is observing what he's doing. And this kid also, he's admiring this painting. And on both sides, he paints to different people. On one side, we see his friends, and the other side, we see the enemies or the opposition or whatever he did, the people he did not like. But this kind of realism is going to be the precursor of the Impressionist, to paint what you see. Gustave Gober painted this burial at Ornans. It was his uncle's burial. He is painting the townspeople, people crying, people going around. The tomb is right here, this hole for the tomb. We see the priest as well, the dog in the center and the right-hand side in the foreground, and painting people, painting whatever surrounds you. This is a realistic representation, not an idealization, but a realistic painting, in comparison to painters like El Greco, which they are also going to admire. Spanish painting for them is very important. The Burial of the Count of Orgaz by El Greco is one of the masterpieces of this Spanish painter, and it's a little different from this realistic way of painting by Gober. We can see that El Greco is focused on the spiritual aspect of this burial. Of course, all of the people come to see this burial from different periods of time. And in the painting by Gober, we see exactly the townspeople, the people who are actually there in that burial of his uncle. Also, we're going to see that artists like Cohen are going to be focused on the everyday life paintings, like the students. She is dressed in this Italian style, the contrasting colors that he chooses as well. This is one of the artists who are going to be admired by the Impressionists, the same as artists like Boudin and Daubigny. This painting by Daubigny, because he was also part of the Barbizon School, shows you how they go to the outdoors and they paint en plein air. They are just looking at a landscape, but instead of making a sketch and then going back to the studio, they go out, they bring their canvases, they bring their paint, they sit down or they stand in front of whatever they want to capture, and they paint it. So here we have an example of an artist who's going to paint en plein air. Van Gogh admired him so much that actually he visited his garden at Auvers, and he paints this garden of Daubigny, where his house was there, still is, By the way, this is the house of Dominique, today's museum. And here we have the painting by Van Gogh. Now we're going to see also that artists that come from Britain, like John Constable, are going to be some of the forerunners. This painting, for example, shows you a landscape. And after the Industrial Revolution, artists are going to go back and appreciate nature. They're going to feel that there is a need to go to the countryside. There is this need to capture the atmosphere, to capture light, to capture art, trees and rivers and landscape in general. We have another one who is very important, which is William Turner. Also, this artist is going to be an influence for Monet and Pissarro when they go to London in 1870. William Turner captures this storm, the movement of the waves, and is very expressionist in a way. The way that Turner uses the brushstroke and he captures movement is also very, very new for artists in France. So they're going to take this from William Turner's painting. On the other side, we have the Academy, the École des Beaux-Arts. This is the way that you have to learn art. This is the way you paint. There are several techniques, and whatever is out of that norm, people do not like it. But of course, the Impressionists are going to go out of that idea, and they're going to be the rebels of the story. Instead of doing like Cabanel was doing, like you see this example, instead of doing mythological, historical, or religious themes or portraits, what they're going to do is trying to capture effects of light, the ephemeral, vanishing moments, movement, etc. This idealization of a mythological theme, for example, the birth of Venus, was fashionable at the time. So Cabanel was one of the contemporaries of the Impressionists, the same as Jean-Léon Gérôme. Like we see here, this is a historic painting. This is a Colosseum. The gladiator is about to kill his enemy. He's waiting for the reaction of the people, and pollice verso, it depends of where you put your thumb down or thumbs up. He's gonna kill him or he's gonna let him live. But look how meticulous this painting is. It's a beautiful painting, by the way, but this is what the Impressionists are going to rebel against. They're going to do the contrary of this kind of representation. On the other hand, landscape was not valued at all, and still life as well was not very, very well seen. They wanted large paintings of historic moments, mythological subjects. So, for example, in the 17th century, we have Nicolas Poussin using the pretext of painting a landscape, but what he does is he is using a subject that is mythological, the nymphs and the serpent, as you can see right here. So using a landscape, but then you see figures that are representing this mythological subject matter. So of course, it is a pretext to do that. And when we see an artist with the academic style, with all of the rules that he had learned, we see this painting by François Sales, another of those contemporary artists, the anatomy class at the École des Beaux-Arts. What you have here is a model. The painter or the artist is, the teacher is showing the muscles and the anatomy of the human body, the same as we see here in this sculpture. And all of the students are learning exactly that. But what we see through the painting is that the artist conceals the brushstroke. What you have to see here is only the composition. You don't see his personality or emotions through the brushstroke. That is what is going to change, because kind of this brushstroke is kind of the signature of an artist. So we can summarize those characteristics of the precursors. So Orientalism, Realism, Japanese art, the blurry lines of Delacroix, observation of nature, the social awareness, and also academic style or neoclassicism. That is what we have during that time. And what we're going to see is those young artists who are going to have extra classes in artist studios. For example, in Charles Aglier's studio, we see artists like Basile, Monet, Renoir, and Alfred Sisley. They're going to meet in those classes, those private classes. They're going to be friends and they're going to talk about art. In this painting, which are 43 portraits of painters that were students of Charles Glier, we see here their self-portraits, and some of them are very well known and recognized, like Gustav Renoir, Alfred Sisley, which we see right here, and this one, which is really funny because this artist is going to add a halo, kind of this prank, and also they included the model in this portrait of all of the students. So instead of the class photo, we have a class portrait, and each one of them made their own portraits. It's rather interesting. Charles Glier, he was a classicist. He was an artist who was well known for his mythological subject. And here we have one example, very famous, very successful during his lifetime. And we find that his representations are very complex with many figures. They are beautifully colored and very well thought out. So we see that artists like Basile, who are one of those young artists who are going to have classes with Glier, he's going to paint still life like this one, this still life with a heron. They're going to follow a tradition in France, for example, by Chardin, to paint birds that are going to be eaten later on. There have been also many tables with different bottles and glasses, and they're going to follow that tradition. But little by little, they are changing their style. Frederic Basile came from a very well-to-do family from Montpellier. He is going to start studying medicine, and he enrolled at the University of Paris, and then he decided he wanted to be an artist. In this painting, we find this kind of a snapshot of the family. They're all posing. They're very stiff. It's very stiff. Basile was part of this group of Impressionists, but he never got to exhibit with them because he died in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. So here we have an example of an early painting by Basile, where you see all of the family members. They're all looking forward as a snapshot. And then we see a beautiful light in the background. They are all in this kind of a terrace. And look at the foreground, because we find here some objects, a hat, some flowers, this kind of a cane. And why is that? Because he's following the academic tradition. Tintoretto, for example, here uses the dog exactly in the same way. This is called repoussoir, which means push back, the same as Basile is doing here. But he's changing already the intention and also his interest. He's interested in light. Another painting by him, he's painting Renoir. I'm showing you because of those relationship between them. They were all friends. They were young, they were students, they would talk about art, they would paint together. Another one by Basile. What we see here is a portrait, of course, we see here, but the importance of the view behind is because of the light that shines through from the background. And then we don't have just one focal point. We have many focal points. It's all over the place. So our eye moves from one side to the other. We see the girl, we see the tree, and we see the background as well. Now, what happened in the mid-19th century? The theory of colors is being studied and discovered by Monsieur Chevreul. He was an industrial chemist, and he is the first one who publishes his ideas about colors and the complementary colors. So this is going to be a huge advancement in how to paint, even though instinctively the artists are going to use this. In this case, there is a scientific intention. Also by other examples like Ogden Rod, which we see here that when he is going to also make his own scientific explorations. Here we have the effects of complementary colors and how you see movement when you put complementary colors. Ogden Rod is going to write, color is pure light. And this is a perfect example of how circumstances and advancements are going to change the way we see art. In 1841, there was another huge invention, the invention of the collapsible lead metal paint tube. Before that, they were not, it was not as easy to travel with paint because they had to use something like this as animal skin bladder bag. They had to grind their pigments. Then, of course, they would dry up very easily. So here we have the example of something new that allows them to bring their paints with them and to go outside to paint en plein air, like Baudin would do. And he became very good friend with Monet. Eugène-Louis Baudin was painting the beaches outside in the north part of France. He's going to become very, very close to Monet, and he's going to inspire him to paint outdoors, to paint en plein air. Here we have some examples by Baudin. So he's painting people, local people, no details, so we don't see their faces. He uses patches of colors instead of being very meticulous. And this is a kind of sketchy characteristic that we find in the Impressionist, compositions. Another one is this one, also by Baudin, trying to capture the smoke as goes out of the chimney of this boat. Also look at the details right here and how he is inspired also by the reflection on the water. Now, Baudin was an older generation. So even though he was invited to exhibit with the Impressionists, he was not part of the group. And here we have him painting, and exactly what I was saying, how to bring your stuff outside and paint. So he would bring a huge umbrella, a small box that would be collapsible, and you would have a small chair with the table and your easel. So this is how he painted, because he wanted to paint whatever was happening. Another thing that is very important to acknowledge is photography, because it became more available. So artists are going to ask themselves, if we don't need to make portraiture, what is the importance of painting? What do we need to do to, instead of just copying nature or copying people, what do we need to do to make a difference? And they change the way they are perceiving nature. Rather than create an exact representation, they're going to change the style. And that is what we're going to see. Also, we find that there are many experiments with photography. One, of course, is going to be film, but chronophotography comes before. So that is how we see motion in photography before being a movie. And that also is going to inspire the Impressionists. They're going to get together in different cafes. One of those cafes was the Café Gerbois. They're going to talk to each other. They're going to discuss. They're going to have also friends who are writers, like Émile Zola and many others. Edouard Manet, for example, was from the upper class. His family actually wanted him to study law, and he went to Rio de Janeiro because he wanted to be in the Navy, and he failed the exam. He couldn't do it. He finally is going to become an artist, and that is how we know him. For example, Fantin Latour was one of his friends, also a very good friend of Degas. And Fantin Latour is not considered an Impressionist artist because he did not use the technique that the Impressionist artists did. But here we have a portrait by Fantin Latour of Manet. The group consisted of Claude Monet, Pissarro, we have also Renoir, we have said also Degas, and Frédéric Bazille. Many others, of course, came later, like Paul Cézanne, Caillebotte, who's going to be also the patron of the arts, and he's going to buy many of his friends' art because he was wealthy, and he's going to be the one who will donate his collection to his country, and this is the beginning of the Musée d'Orsay today. So here we have other artists, women artists like Berthe Morisot, and also Mary Cassatt, others as well. I'm not mentioning all of them, by the way. Alfred Sisley, probably less known, and also Armand Guillaumin. Others were exhibiting with the Impressionists as well, but these are probably the best known. Here we have a painting by Fantin-Laduré, the studio of Le Batignolles, because it is a tribute to Monet. Monet is painting right here in the center. He's in front of his canvas. And he's accompanied by the younger artists, Auguste Renoir, Émile Zola, who was a writer, Frédéric Bazille, which I mentioned was killed at war in the French-Prussian War, and Claude Monet. Edouard Manet, even though he paints in the style of the Impressionists, most of the time, he never exhibited with them. So he was not part of the group. On the other hand, in this studio, here we find some elements, like, for example, Minerva. This is the goddess, the Greek goddess, and the love of antiquity that all artists had, at the same time as also the love for Japanese art, which we see right here. Here we have another very interesting painting, because this painting was done by Bazille. This is his studio. This is where he worked. This is where he lived. And here we have Bazille. First of all, this is the tall guy right here in the center. He's discussing something with his friends. Renoir and Claude Monet are right here. They lived here before, by the way. Edouard Manet is right in front of that canvas. And other friends, like this musician, Edmond Maître, and Zachary Ostrov, who was a critic. Now, we have here an example of some of his paintings, and we see here in the background, this very famous painting, which we see right here, by Bazille, called La Toilette. Again, that combination of representing something very ordinary or common, and at the same time, the idea of an oriental kind of taste, like this this shawl right here, or the servant also. This also has been called Bathsheba, although it's not a biblical topic. The admiration for Velázquez is very important to acknowledge as well. This painting by Manet shows you the tragic actor, Rouvière, as Hamlet. And here we find a painting by Velázquez on your left-hand side. Look at the different contrasting colors of the black and the background and the long shadows on the floor. So again, Manet is going to be really inspired by Spanish painters, especially Velázquez. And this painting, of course, is very famous. This painting was a scandal in 1863, the luncheon on the grass, and it was rejected by the jury. There was a jury, there was an exhibition at the Salon, an official exhibition, and this painting was rejected. Of course, I have a whole class dedicated only to this painting. And today we're going to talk actually about the characteristics of Impressionism. So we're going to mention this characteristic by Edouard Manet. When you see black, most of the time is a painting by Edouard Manet. Berthe Morisot is also going to be a very well-known painter. She was married to Edouard Manet's brother, Eugène Manet. Here we have a painting by Degas of Eugène Manet, and actually Luncheon on the Grass is also showing Eugène Manet sitting right there. But Berthe Morisot also was exhibiting at the Paris Salon. Many of her paintings were accepted at the Salon. And at some point she got rejected. So she's going to start showing her work with the Impressionists. She would defy any social conventions. She became a professional painter when women were not allowed to be professional painters whatsoever. So here we have her being a mother, being a wife, but also being an artist. As you find this beautiful painting of Paris, viewed from the Trocadero, as it was seen in 1873, more or less. Look at the contrasting painting by another artist, Martin Rico y Ortega. This is also a painting of Paris, but very meticulously made. The importance of the clouds and the flowers on the terrace. And here we find Morisot painting just an impression. That is why it is called Impressionism. She painted very often her daughter, Julie Manet, as you can see her here. And also we see that Manet is going to make another painting that is going to be another scandal, which is Olympia, as we find her here with this bouquet of peonies, and the servant is bringing that bouquet of an admirer to this prostitute. Again, we see a very complex painting with lots of tradition, but look at this painting of Basile, because Basile was still trying to figure out his own style. Here we have this African woman with peonies, as it's called. This is the title of it. And the flowers have a lot of importance in this painting. Also admiring the work by Velázquez. When we see the foreground, there is a table in the foreground. It's a kitchen table. She's preparing everything right here. The same as we see right here. The foreground is that still life, is that vase with the flowers, and the figure is all of it in the background. I mentioned the salon, the official salon. It was a juried exhibition every year. Here we have a painting by Henri Grevex. By the way, Henri Grevex was also a juror at the salon. So what he's painting here is exactly what he was looking at. So even though he's not an impressionist, we see how the academy worked. You had to present your work. You had to be accepted, of course, and then you would have your work being exhibited. And if you were lucky, somebody would buy it. We see here that Honoré Daumier is making fun of that. And this caricature with the French bourgeoisie, and what the caption says is, this year, Venuses again, always Venuses. So they wanted, of course, a change. And that is what we're going to have. We're going to have another salon, the Salon des Refusés, which is the rejected ones. And Napoleon III is the founder of this new salon. So whatever was not exhibited at the official salon, you had another part or another place to exhibit it. But actually, the Impressionists are going to be very close to writers, poets like Stéphane Mallarmé, Charles Baudelaire, and also Émile Zola. And they're going to be so close to them. They're going to be also inspired by their thoughts, their philosophy, and their friendship, of course. We see this illustration. I mentioned this illustration by Manet of the Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, because Stéphane Mallarmé made the translation, and he was very close to Manet. So he asked him to do the illustration of the Raven. So that is something very important to see. So what are the general characteristics of Impressionism? And they are very clear once you get to know them. Light, off-center composition, asymmetry, painting and plein air, and all of them we can see in this painting. The off-center composition of this man on the side, the light that comes through in the background, the asymmetrical composition, and of course, painting outside, painting outdoors, trying to capture the freshness of the atmosphere. So what they use also is impasto, which means that the pigment is very thick. They do not dilute the pigment. There's no transparency in their painting. And we see that characteristic in other artistic movements, but not in Impressionism. What they want to capture is the shadows, the reflection of the sky on the floor. As you find this purple and bluish color, it adds freshness to the painting. And what is the subject matter? Everything and nothing. The atmosphere, the effect of light, the color. Monet is going to paint different moments of time during the day or during the different seasons. And what he's interested in is capturing that effect, something that is going to change every second. How to paint that? You have to move very, very quickly to capture that. Or another characteristic is a close-up, because we can see this painting of the balcony. And here we have that the subject matter here is that balcony. we of course see the road, the street in the at the bottom of here, but we have to see very closely. But the close-up of these iron work is very interesting to see, because what is the subject matter? Again, it's nothing and it's everything. Everything can be beautiful, even this just iron work. So as I mentioned, the reflection of light is one of the characteristics. How it reflects on the water, how it changes every time the sun changes. So different moments of the day, like the twilight or the early morning, or different moments of the year. On the other hand, because of photography and also motion pictures, they want to capture movement. The relaxed boundary between figure and background that comes from Delacroix, where you don't have an outline, you don't have a design before, you don't have a drawing before, and you paint as you go. So that idea also adds to the softness of the painting. And photography is going to have a very big role, because it's like a snapshot. How to, when you just click your camera and you can capture that moment, is exactly what the painters want to do. Also, another characteristic is the empty space in the center. So the off-center composition is very clear in this painting by Degas, where you have all the ballerinas on the side, but there's an empty space right here. This is something very new. Almost we can say that the window becomes the subject matter of the painting. And here we have that modernity comes along, because the trains are going to communicate the different cities, especially the capital of Paris, with different parts of the countryside. The Saint-Lazare train station is something very new. And here we find the vanishing moment of the smoke, the changing effects of light because of that smoke. He made 12 paintings, Monet, of this train station. Of course, he made different ones of different subject matters. And the impasto, that thickness that we can see each one of the brushstrokes, very small brushstrokes, and with just one application of the paint, we see a figure already, or a house in the background, or anything else. For example, in this detail of this painting by Sisley, we see the fast brushstroke, because the river flooded in late autumn. And of course, he wants to try to see how to paint this. The branches that are almost dead, you can see here, the water that has flooded all of the area, and how to capture that. But when you see the painting completely, you find that it is much more complex than that. You have to be very close to see the technique. They try to work very, very fast to capture the effect of light. So the off-center composition is very clear in this painting as well by Monet. Monet painted this couple on this boat, but look at the line of the mast right here with the sail right there. It's almost like this parallel of the body of this female figure on this side. If you see this painting in Venice and the colorful way that he captured light, and the blue sky is really beautiful, the reflection on the water, but also look at the detail, because when I'm showing you this painting, also 19th century painting, the artist on the left, he wants to capture the whole boat. While in this case, what we find is gondola is the cut image of the gondola, like a snapshot, again, the same as on this side. So he breaks the image. The beautiful, really reflection on the water captures our attention. The same tonal value from the background with the different figures and the different objects. Like you see these colors that are so bright and really wonderful. When we see the life of Paris, Parisian life, like those cafe concerts like we see here, we have the different layers of the view that we find. So the waitress, for example, here is in the middle. She's drinking some kind of a beer. Then we see in the back this dancer. And then in the foreground, we have those two people. they're completely disengaged. And then we are separated as observers, as viewers, with this table in the foreground. When we compare paintings like this one, look at the background. This is how we see. This is the diffuse color in the background. There's an atmospheric perspective. So we find that the mountains in the back, they're very blurry. They don't have as brightness, or the color is not as bright as in the foreground. And we start to see some of the things very, very blurry. While in Impressionism, each one of the figures or the objects have the same tonal value. So the dancer in the background is as colorful as the people in the foreground. We've spoken about the fragmentary vision, or the cut images as we find here. When you are a painter, you can choose that, but the effect of photography has a lot to do with this. They are going to capture the bohemian life, the bourgeoisie, people going to cafes, to those kind of taverns or bars, and movement. Movement is very important. Like the dancer here on the stage who's about to spin. How to capture that? Because remember, this is the age of film, movies. Cinema started at the time. And this, of course, people are at awe of this new invention. There is an interest in movement. How are they going to do that? So the Impressionists do exactly that. They go, for example, to the races at Longchamp. And what Monet did, even though he was friends of all of those Impressionists, he never painted completely en plein air like Pissarro or Monet did. He would sketch and then he would finish in his studio. So this is, of course, one of the activities of the upper class, to go to the races. And he would find this snapshot of a painting, or a painting of the races, as they are just as impressed by how to capture movement. Or this one by Degas. It's called the false start. So there is a comparison. Of course, there are many artists who are going to be interested in painting horses and how they run. Even Toulouse-Lautrec later on, who is a post-impressionist, also is going to be interested on the races. La Grenouillère was a place outside of Paris, the River Seine, which we see right here, where there was a small restaurant for the middle class, and people would go there. So the Impressionists would go very often there, and they would paint at La Grenouillère. Here we have a painting by Monet. He is painting another version on the left-hand side. Again, the reflection of the water, the off-center composition. So you get all of those characteristics. And here we have the version by Renoir. They were standing side by side, painting more or less the same image. So we find the restaurant on the side, the small island on the middle, more or less, the reflection of the water, the boats right there, and the trees in the background. So we have both of them right here. So very often we see that what we have in painting is what they are looking at. And sometimes we cannot say who painted what, because they are painting side by side, painting the same and more or less the same style. They're going to have their first exhibition in 1874. This is the first exhibition of the group at the at Nadar's apartment. Here we have an image of the Boulevard des Capucines, which we see a very high vantage point, looking down into the street. And the apartment was right here, and this is more or less the view from there. And this is where they're going to have their first exhibition. Nadar was a very famous photographer. He actually photographed many celebrities of his time. Many people knew his studio. And the Impressionists are going to create this cooperative and anonymous association of painters, sculptors, and engravers. And they wanted to exhibit independently. They did not want to be rejected by the salon, so they are not going to show them. And this painting is going to be exhibited at that time in that exhibition. Today is at the Marmottan Museum in Paris. And this is the painting that is going to give the name to the movement. Claude Monet painted this, and it's going to represent what Impressionism is. Monet is going to be the most consistent, the most prolific painter, and the title of this painting is called Impression Sunrise. There's a debate about it, but look at this hazy seascape. The brushstroke is very loose, and this is the port of Le Havre, which we see right here today. Of course, still we have here an industrial city where they're building some of those ships, etc., but also the reflection of this very red sun. The critic, Louis Leroy, is the one who made fun of this painting, and he's going to call the style impressionistic because he said that it looked like a sketch. It's just an impression. It's not a finished product. So, of course, he's going to write an article criticizing the exhibition, and it's going to be published at the newspaper Charivari. Here we have Louis Leroy. But again, we see a very different painting. They were against rationalism, geometry, measurements, and that was being followed from the Renaissance onward. And they said that this kind of painting had lost its magic. And I'm just putting a painting of the Renaissance, very, of course, thought out, measured with linear perspective, of course, a vantage point, etc. So what they're going to see in contrast is something much more loose. Now, when there was an exhibit in 2014 at the Marmottan, they made math calculations to see from which one of those hotels or windows Monet was painting from to do this painting. And there is also an argument if it was really that painting, the one that was exhibited there and the one that Louis Leroy was criticized. When we see this painting by Eugène Baudin, this is a sunset, and it's a little more similar in the way that it's painted from the one that Monet made, and probably it's not a sunrise, probably it's a sunset. Also, when we see this one by Monet, some scholars think that this is the painting that was shown and that the one that Leroy was referring to, because this is called also sunrise. Today it is called Sunrise Marine, but also it's painting the silhouette of those sailboats. If we compare this one, probably this is a sunset and the other one is a sunrise. And the original name was simply Impression. And that is the debate that we have today. But it has been accepted by every art history book or anywhere you see that the painting on the right is the one that was criticized by Leroy. This is what we see by Monet. He painted what he saw. Like this one as well of the port of Le Havre, the same port where we see the beautiful light. So in this case, we see that they are friends, and for example, one summer afternoon, Edouard Manet, Auguste Rodin, they are visiting each other and they stage a paint-off. And they're going to paint here. This is Claude Monet in Argenteuil. This is where they're going to be together painting. And here we have the painting by Manet. This is the Monet family and their green garden at Argenteuil. And what Renoir is doing is Madame Monet and her son. So it's very, very similar, but it's not exactly the same. What Monet chose to do is he painted the portrait of Manet at his easel, painting also right here. So it's really interesting to see at the beginning how each one of them had their ideas, but at the same time, they were painting very similarly. They're going to have 8 exhibitions. Pissarro is going to be exhibiting in all of them. Basile, as I mentioned, died in 1870. And we find that the second exhibition, they're going to have the exhibition at the Durand-Ruel Gallery, who's going to help them out a lot financially later on. He will have a photograph of them, Paul Durand-Ruel with Claude Monet and his family at Giverny. So I have to mention, Renoir had a great salon success in 1879. By the 1880s, Monet became financially secure. The group dissolved in 1886 after those 8 exhibitions. There were a lot of disagreements. Pissarro and Cézanne were on one side with Paul Signac and Serron, who are going to be considered post-impressionists. Degas on the other side was trying to bring other artists like Jean-François Raffaelli and Ludovic Lepic. Finally, in 1890s, Pissarro is going to have financial success. And in 1894, we have the Dreyfus Affair, which completely separated the group much more. Sisley died in poverty in 1899. This is a painting by Sisley. That's also why we don't know him enough. Caillebotte died in 1894, and he left his collection to the state. Again, this was a debate because they did not like yet this kind of painting, even though they're already been 20 years after the first exhibition. Finally, after a year of negotiation, they are going to have an annex to the Luxembourg Palace, and it's going to be the Jeu de Paume in 1894. It's going to be open to the public. Today is part of the Musée d'Orsay collection. There is a new generation like Cézanne, Toulouse-Lautrec, Van Gogh, and Gauguin, who are going to bring new ideas and new styles. And we know that Manet was never part of this artistic movement. Monet, Sisley, Morisot, and Pissarro were considered the purest impressionists. Degas, by the way, even though he is an impressionist, he rejected most of the ideas of the impressionists. He never painted on plein air. Renoir at some point turned away from impressionism and began to paint a little more classic, with a more classic style. And very quickly, I'm going to tell you a few tips how to recognize the impressionist painters and their style. So Manet, he used black most of the time. He's going to make café scenes. He painted his friends. And of course, the most iconic paintings are Le Déjeuner sur l'Herbe and Olympia. Then we have Mary Cassatt, where we see women's activities like drinking tea. It was not proper for them to go to the cafes as single ladies. They needed a chaperone, so they go to the theater. So it's very recognizable. Also, she painted women with child or mothers with children. We see Berthe Morisot, also feminine subject, interior scenes of their house, a very fast brushstroke and very soft image. She painted very often her daughter, as you can see here. In many occasions, we see her daughter growing up. Then we have Monet, who actually did not use black anymore at some point. He was interested in the passing effects, the ephemeral, the smoke, the clouds, the reflection on the water. And he made many series at different times of the day or of the year. Also Degas. Degas is known for his ballerina scenes, movement, where you don't have a clear outline. He was very interested in photography, so we have pictures taken by him, who later are going to become paintings. He was also interested in horses and awkward postures, as you can see the bath in many occasions on all of those toilet scenes that we see by Degas. Camille Pissarro, we find landscape and people interacting with the landscape, the effects of light and atmosphere, people working, many family portraits. He was a family man, and also views from the city, usually from a window, because he had an eye problem at the end of his life. And Renoir, who's going to be first interested in mythological subjects. He gets many, many commissions for portraits. He always is concentrated in happy settings, light, also domestic scenes, a much more classical technique he uses at some point, and a much more romantic, sensual representation of female beauty. And finally, which we see Frederic Bazille. He, as I mentioned, he had a very short career because he died very young, but he was going to be a combination of Orientalism, which we see here, a painting by Jérôme on the right-hand side, and a painting by Basile on the left-hand side. Also here we have another artist who's Whistler, who was also inspired by Japanism or this Orientalism that was fashionable at the time. Basile had this combination of styles and was very influenced and inspired by Velázquez as well, and other artists like Caravaggio, as you can see here. And we finally see that the prices of Impressionism at auctions, and I'm not saying private sales, only the record prices at auctions. 1990, Renoir's painting Bal de Moulin de la Galette, $78 million. In 2008, this painting by Monet, Water Lilies, was sold for $80.5 million. Cézanne's painting, one of the 60 versions of La Montagne Saint-Victoire, for $100 million. And in the year 2019, this painting by Monet, The Haystacks, was sold for $110.7 million. So as you can see, Impressionist paintings and Impressionism is very, very fashionable today, but it was not at the time of its inception. Thank you very much, everyone.